pour avoir une chance de rejoindre la famille Channel Africa. Si vous n'avez pas de réponse après 14 jours, cela signifie que vous n'avez pas été retenu. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
This August, we celebrate the strength, brilliance, and unstoppable spirit of African women.
It was the women themselves who strove for and got the changes by lobbying, going through NGOs, and by networking.
That's you, ladies. From the boardroom to the classroom, from the marketplace to the microphone, women are leading, innovating, and transforming our continent every day.
Oh, here's to knowing that as a woman, your voice can change the world.
Your voice matters. Your story inspires. Your presence is powerful. This Women's Month, we honor you. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Winds it down on African World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
And it's 2100 hours on this Monday, the 25th of August, 2025. A warm welcome to Africa World Hour here on Channel Africa, the Africa Perspective. I am Tshepiso Umakwetla. Coming up on the program, 60 minutes of the very latest news developments from the heart of the continent to all corners of the globe. We bring you the voices, the stories, and the perspectives that matter, and your perspective matters, so please reach out to us, share with us wherever you're listening, watching from, what's happening in and around your community, and the conversations that are shaping the dialogue that you're having there. Let's get straight to your top stories.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tshepiso Umakwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And we start in the Sudan, where paramilitaries in Darfur have been accused of killing more than a dozen civilians as they try to flee the besieged city of Al Fasher. The Sudan Doctors Network accused fighters from the Rapid Support Forces of continuing a campaign of forced displacement and ethnic cleansing. The BBC's Kalkidan Yebetal has those details.
A statement by Sudan's Doctors Network says among those killed by fighters from the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces were 5 children. The incident took place on the road between the besieged city of El Fasher and Tawila. The RSF has repeatedly been accused of targeting non-Arab communities in Darfur, an allegation it dismisses. Fighting between the RSF and the Sudanese army has continued to intensify in parts of Sudan.
And the military auditor general in the Democratic Republic of Congo has called for the country's former president, Joseph Kabila, to be sentenced to death for crimes including homicide, rape and torture. General Lucien René Lukilia says Kabila ruled the DRC for nearly 20 years before stepping down in 2018 and has been living abroad since late 2023, spending much of his time in South Africa, but says Kabila, who is being tried in absentia, must be held accountable for alleged crimes against humanity, including his role in the massacres of civilians.
He was given the opportunity to appear in person or be represented, or his legal representation. This thing didn't just start without him being notified. All the process were followed. So he was given the opportunity for fair trial. But when they decide to boycott or just not show up at all and without any explanation, this is also seen as sabotaging the institutions of the states, and which is another criminal offense. So the opportunity was given for a fair trial.
Human rights lawyers and activists have launched a court challenge against the government of Eswatini for making secretive deals with President Donald Trump's administration to accept third country deportees from the United States, which they claim are unconstitutional. Zweli Martin Dlamini, editor of the Swaziland News, says the case will be heard by the Kingdom's High Court of Eswatini on Friday.
there is a prospect of success in this case if you look at it in the legal aspects, considering the fact that this agreement was signed secretly. Even cabinet was not involved. In fact, it was the Prime Minister of Eswatini who was collaborating or corresponding with the United States in signing this agreement. So there is a prospect of
illegal firearms. We are recovering more than one illegal firearm from the Cape Flats a day now, and in the last 3 years, 1,600. And only 5% of those cases go all the way to a conviction. Most of them fall by the wayside at some point in the investigation chain or in the prosecution chain. And when you tackle SAPS about this, they will say our detectives have got 350 cases per person, and many of those cases are even higher priority. So we can't focus on this illegal firearm case.
And finally, Palestinian health officials say the death toll from the Israeli attacks on the Nasser hospital in Gaza's southern city of Khan Yunis has risen to 20. Several journalists, including one from Reuters, are among the dead. The BBC's Mike Thompson has the details.
Khan Yunis's Nasser hospital, the city's only one still operating, was hit twice. Some of those killed had rushed to help others after the first strike. A video showed a doctor holding up bloodied clothes to a camera before a second strike filled the air with smoke and debris. 5 journalists are reported to be among those killed. One, the mother of a 12-year-old boy, freelanced for the Associated Press. Others worked for Reuters and Al Jazeera. Israel says it regrets any harm to uninvolved individuals and does not target journalists as
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
And just a reminder that you can reach out to us, speak to us on some of the content that we're covering and share your thoughts. And if there's any story that you believe that we should be reflecting, please reach out to us. We are on the social media platforms, TikTok, X, Instagram at Channel Africa 1. We're also on Facebook, Channel Africa. Now, coming up in just a moment, we'll be looking at IT developments, a major deal being signed in Mozambique. But let's start with this. A high-level gathering of health ministers in Lusaka, Zambia, beginning today for the 75th session of the World Health Organization Regional Committee for Africa. The ministers' roles as decision makers and the importance of their collective action on a regional scale will come into focus as they reflect on several issues over the next couple of days. In delivering his opening at the summit, the Director General of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, said the region's many achievements should not be overshadowed by its challenges.
Already said, and has made significant progress in strengthening its health workforce with almost 20,000 health workers recruited in the last 3 years. You're also transforming health digitalization under the Smart Zambia Institute. I also thank you, Your Excellency, for your leadership and your commitment as a cholera control global champion. This regional committee is also significant at the first in a new era under the leadership of Professor Janabi. My brother, congratulations once again on your election. You have taken the helm at an unprecedented and extremely tumultuous time for WHO. We're grateful for your experience and expertise as you have navigated these challenges. Although you have only been in the job for a few weeks, thank you for the commitment, energy you have brought to it, and for your first report. As you wrote in your report, despite the turbulence of the past year, WHO has worked tirelessly to meet the challenges you face. The regional office responded to over 160 public health emergencies, rolled out malaria vaccines in 19 countries, and strengthened health financing in 80% of your countries. 5 countries were validated for the elimination of at least one neglected tropical disease. Millions of children were protected through immunization and nutrition programs, and much more. As you know, our continent faces many challenges. Maternal and child mortality remain high in many countries. Progress against HIV, malaria, and TB has stalled, in some cases reversed, while the burden of non-communicable diseases and mental health conditions only continues to increase. Every year, we face health emergencies caused by outbreaks, conflict, or climate-related weather events. And despite the undeniable progress we have made, health systems in many countries remain inadequate to meet these challenges, with uneven service coverage, high out-of-pocket health spending, and underpowered health workforce. Even in the face of financial and organizational challenges, the regional office has continued to deliver world-class technical support to our member states.
There is a Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, speaking at the opening of the 75th session of the World Health Organization Regional Committee for Africa. Earlier on, we had Zambia's Health Minister, Dr. Elijah Muchima, echoing very important words, saying the complexities of today's health threats demand that we stand united. No single nation can overcome these challenges in isolation. So this previews some of the discussions that will happen tomorrow as the summit continues. We're joined now by Family and Reproductive Health at WHO Regional Office for Africa, Dr. Janet Kayita, who is a team leader. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us. As we heard Dr. Tedros there speak about how particularly women and children are still suffering the brunt of the challenges that particularly the Global South faces. So as ministers gather to make these crucial decisions, what are the specific actionable policies and investment decisions that you believe must come out of tomorrow's meeting, particularly when looking at maternal newborn child health?
Thank you very much, and good evening. I think that the framing by the Director General is a very nice way of understanding the complexities that we face, but also the focus on women, on children, on adolescents is a very nice way of bringing a face to the issues. So the technical paper that's going to be presented tomorrow is really talking about transforming health systems to deliver for women and children in a context where we're making progress, but the progress is not sufficient to meet the SDG targets that we signed up to. So the member states in the region already signed off on a number of resolutions that are related, resolutions to do with universal health coverage, to do with the global strategy for women's, children's and adolescent health, a variety of resolutions, many of which reinforce each other. But really the focus of the paper tomorrow is very much focusing on unblocking the implementation challenges. So it talks about 3 flagships, and the first one is really about investments, health investments being an imperative for development. It's talking about transforming health systems, and it's very much talking about service delivery, so equitable quality services for women, children, adolescents everywhere. And I'll just focus a little bit on that last one that's really about service delivery. So this is about making sure that all population groups, women, children, adolescents, the youth, that the health system meets their broad range of needs And these are everything from health promotion, disease prevention. When they're sick, it's about diagnosis, it's about treatment, but it's also very much about rehabilitation. It's very much about palliative care. And how can member states do this? It's about defining what is called an essential health service package that looks at all these population groups that I spoke about and thinks about what services should be provided at what level of the health system and the linkages that are necessary across the different levels. Because of course, what you're able to offer at the healthcare facility that is the primary contact of communities is very different than what you're able to offer at a district hospital, and very different than what you're able to offer at a national teaching hospital. So those referral linkages are very critical. And also ensuring that a standard of care, a quality package of care is delivered. And it's very much about the people offering those services. So the healthcare workers, their availability, their equitable distribution, their competences to offer that service, their conditions of service, and so on. So that's the angle on transforming health systems.
Dr. Katia, let me just jump in then, because you've obviously said quite a lot that needs to be unpacked, but one of the initial things that you said was about a need for greater investment. And it's not just financial resources that need to be mobilized. You also mentioned the need to unblock the delivery blockages within primary healthcare systems. Where are the failures, just in terms of the policies might be there, but the implementation is lacking, or I don't know if it's because of infrastructure. Perhaps if you can just speak even from Zambia's perspective, what you're experiencing, where the improvement needs to be focused on, and of course prioritized, particularly for women, children and adolescents.
So you're very right that action has to be at all of the different levels. So at national level, the policies, the norms, the standards, but all of them have to be aligned, and they have to come together in a way that's coherent at implementation level. So very much focusing at the subnational level. So how do you make sure that there is the health leadership at that level to deliver services? How do you make sure that you have a good understanding of the population in that catchment area, what their needs are, what the data says about who's being left behind, how you can target those populations that are left behind with the right package of services, making very sure that it's an integrated service, which means that it is everything from health promotion to what to do if in fact a woman, a child, an adolescent is sick and seeks healthcare. So making sure that all those different pieces of the health system, from the healthcare workers to availability of medicines to availability of data at that level, governance at that level, participation of sectors outside of health, the local government, education, social workers, how to make sure that everything comes together in a way that serves the needs of the users of the health system closest to to where they are, closest to the community. And again, making sure that the referral linkages work, because yes, the majority of services can be offered at the primary care level, over 90% actually. But for those patients that do need referral to higher levels of care, they are then able to receive that care.
Your health minister at the opening made a very important statement by saying that, you need to deepen regional collaboration, share best practices, but also, underscoring the fact that no nation can face these challenges alone. So partnerships are critical at both a regional and bilateral levels. Are there ones that you would like to point out as Zambia that you have pioneered or have collaborated with which countries, particularly to help advance better healthcare access for women, children, and adolescents?
So partnerships are especially critical, as the opening statements highlighted out, the especially difficult financing situation that we're in. So in terms of the regional partnerships, the Africa Union and Africa Union organs are especially critical, and this includes the regional economic commissions, but also includes bodies like the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It includes multilateral that are already closely collaborating with the Regional Office for Africa, the UN agencies, UNFPA, UNICEF, the World Bank's Global Financing Facility, that all comes together as part of the global movement for every woman, every child, every newborn, everywhere, as part of the Child Survival Action Initiative, but also for adolescents, especially in regional commitments, both for Western Central Africa and also for Eastern and Southern Africa, for healthy, educated, thriving adolescents and youth. So a range of regional partnerships. For the AU, there's a critical partnership around accelerating reduction of maternal mortality, KAMA, that is now KAMA Plus, and that looks more broadly at women, children, but also adolescents. So the campaign to accelerate reduction of maternal mortality, but also the well-being of women, children, and adolescents. Several countries have very active annual campaigns that were kickstarted with the World Health Day on the 7th of April of this year. There's also very strong partnerships in many countries with professional organizations, whether that's midwives, nurses, doctors, obstetricians, pediatricians, around the issues of women and children. Very active civil society organizations, again, particularly youth. The agenda around adolescent health is very much about youth agency, youth voice, so a very important constituency. Private sector is a very, very important constituency as well. So these are the sort of partnerships. We have a range of non-state actors that participate regularly at the regional committee. And these are the sort of partnerships that we'll be advancing. But of course, the foundational partnership is with member states. And there's a very growing ministerial-led movement around women's and children's health. We've been very, very encouraged by the very high level prioritization of women, children's, and adolescent health in this region by ministers of health. So very much hoping to deepen those conversations.
We saw recently South Africa's president speaking at TICAD, speaking about, collective commitment. And he was speaking about an organization of which he chairs the Global Leaders Network. So I want to ask you, as Zambia, the kind of vehicles that you believe will help strengthen, those accountability mechanisms, because the Global South is sharing the disproportionate weight of, the gains that have been lost because of the challenges such as aid cut. What is your next plan in pushing for greater, political will and accountability, but also ensuring that you also strengthen, as you say, those regional partnerships, but mainly towards accountability to change the trajectory for women, children, and adolescents?
So you're very right. And there's a perfect example. In 2017, ministers and heads of state signed off on the Addis Declaration of Immunization. And this is something that is monitored on an annual basis by monitoring indicators that member states have agreed on, and these are monitored on an annual basis. This is where we're trying to move to for women's, children's, and adolescent health. So a set of indicators that's agreed across member states, that's not just monitored through scorecards, because many countries do have scorecards, including scorecards for sexual reproductive health and rights, scorecards on immunization and so on, but really being monitored at the highest level. So by heads of state, when they have their heads of state summit, we're hoping that this is where we get to. But already for the regional committee, every 2 years, there's a requirement to provide a progress report against progress being made for women, children, and adolescents. And since last year, when ministers of health all signed off on a resolution to accelerate progress in reduction of maternal and child mortality, again, there was that agreement for the World Health Assembly to receive an annual report card of progress that is being made. So really the aspiration is to bring that closer to home and to have that report card on an annual basis and being monitored by heads of state and led by ministers in their respective countries.
Well, we really thank you for your time and honoured that you could join us to speak to us about the WHO Afro-Regional Summit that is taking place in Lusaka. It took off today, and tomorrow there will be a discussion on how to improve the lot of women, children and adolescents. And of course, as Dr. Janica Ita has told us, she's a team lead for the WHO Afro Office for Africa on maternal reproductive health, saying that there needs to be concerted effort on a number of things, including investments. So thank you very much for speaking to us, Dr. Katia. And that's where we leave it for now. More stories still to come here on Africa World Hour.
9 to 12 midday Central African Time. On the Move with Palisa Tau and Benjamin Mushata.
Should influencers be expected to be impactful in society? If there is a social or societal conversation that goes up, should we be waiting eagerly to hear what the influencers have to say?
They are more than just entertainers. They are thought leaders to some certain degree. They influence culture, they influence people's thought processes, they set trends, they shape opinions of people. And the sad reality is, although a lot of them don't want to accept it, I think we're getting better with them realizing that they're embarking in that journey, and in that space comes with a certain level of responsibility.
I see it differently in that, professionals are already good at their job, but there is an optionality that they might have to use the position that they hold in society to be able to deliver a message. This year you made the example of actors and actresses. So the same could apply to a sportsman. Just because someone's good at soccer doesn't mean that they have to have an influence over society from a specific standpoint.
Keeping you on the know and on the move. 1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tshepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And it's just about 21:30 here on Africa World Hour. Welcome if you've just joined us as we continue looking at some of the top stories that are being discussed, that are unfolding across the continent, across the world. Now, we talk about this. Sedna Africa, a leading provider of industrial IT and connectivity solutions, securing a landmark contract with the Beira terminal operator Conelda de Mozambique to deploy a Nokia private mobile network at Beira port in Mozambique. So this is expected to significantly enhance safety, productivity and operational efficiency at one of the region's most critical transport hubs. The company says the initiative will address issues such as narrowband technologies which hamper digital transformation efforts in the region. For more on this, we're joined by Managing Director of Sedna Africa, Anton Fester. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening, Tshepiso, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you and engage with your listeners.
So I want to backtrack a bit for the benefit of us who aren't subject matter specialists. In English, what I've just said, what exactly are we talking about?
Tshepiso, we are deploying what would be traditionally seen as a public mobile network, but localized for a particular site. So all the capability that you would associate with mobile technology, low latency, the ability to stream high quantities of data over significant distances, we have now enabled that for the site. A narrowband technology, which you referred to in your introduction, is quite a data technology, and it can't accommodate use cases which require a significant amount of data traffic. So Cornalda have been incredibly forward-looking with understanding what are the steps that they are going to need to put in place to really unlock this digital value.
So or should I start by saying, traditionally, what have major ports used in terms of operational technologies or systems, and what has changed now? Because you are saying that, there have been changes that have not been kept up with. So, the narrowband technologies with limited data throughput, what has that? What has been the effect of that?
Great question. So the narrowband technology has been in place in the ports for decades. They have fulfilled very simple, low data requirement use cases. For example, telemetry. Where is something? I need to give a lat long, and it's a very small data package. What it can't do, though, is it can't allow you to stream video. It can't allow you to apply any kind of AI analytics over it. It also can't enable advances which we are now seeing in the connected worker space to improve safety at the ports. So when it comes to location tracking, environmental monitoring, fall detection, paperless work orders, these can now all be enabled through smart devices, smartphones, tablets, where before, I don't know if you're as old as me, Chapiso, but those old green screens or the orange monochrome screens, that would have been most associated with that, connectivity solution.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to, keep to the fifth on that one about how old I am. So let's talk about, we're in an environment where we are motivating for greater trade, not only intra-Africa, but diversifying our trade with other markets. So the type of technologies that would help boost that kind of activity, what are the demands, particularly in terms of infrastructure with its modern industrial use cases? Because for somebody who doesn't know how they operate, obviously we know that safety is important, but to what end?
Chapiso, we're seeing the full end-to-end supply chain application of this technology. Our genesis is in heavy industrial areas, for example, mines. We did Africa's first surface mining mobile private network. We also did an underground private network in Zimbabwe, which enables trucks that carry 45 tons of blasted material to drive themselves underground. And as we're seeing, and thankfully the platinum price is increasing, so they're having a much better last 2 months. But as we're seeing Africa starting to beneficiate its naturally abundant wealth, the ports are an incredibly important part of that value chain. We can extract the minerals, but if we can't move it, and trade with it, it has very little value. So if we're looking specifically, you mentioned the safety use cases. We have seen worker safety is a fundamental tenet in all of the areas in which we operate. Heavy industries, certainly in the past 10, 15 years, have really started paying more attention to not only the environment that the workers are placed in, but also the tools that they have to ensure that they remain safe. So this could range from environmental monitoring, which I mentioned before. It could mean scanning a space for noxious gases, or it could be dust monitoring, and alerting workers should they need to go to a safe place to be able to go there.
So you're going to take what you've learned from mining and apply it to, I believe, oil and gas to deal with infrastructure bottlenecks, particularly now with this deal in Beira in Mozambique. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? And also, importantly, how that will also help, create employment? Is there going to be some skills developments transfer, or how are you going to do that?
Certainly. We're very fortunate that the customer that we're working with, Conalda, are incredibly self-sufficient. So part of the project is to be able to support the network in the very short term, but with the express intention of transferring all the necessary network support skills to their very able-bodied technicians. I'm a little ashamed to say it was my first trip to Mozambique about 2 months ago when we met with the site's management. But what an incredibly intelligent and educated a group of individuals. And the Beira port forms an incredibly important corridor when it comes to trading with Zambia, Malawi, and Zimbabwe. We've used the port when we did the project in Harare, and we do know that especially in a town like Beira, which the port is the primary employer with all the secondary industries that are able to with the use cases which the mine are looking to implement to make the cargo forwarding through the port even more accurate and faster. We're hoping that the port maintains its competitive edge and continues to be used for many years to come.
So it's also about ecosystems. How are you going to take the risk management aspect of it, boosting condition monitoring in connecting not only the infrastructure but communities as well, the assets and communities?
At the moment, our primary focus is to deliver the network to Conalda. I know that with regards to Conalda specifically, they have an incredible graduate placement program where they actually give a significant amount of young people within the community the opportunity and the exposure of working with a world-class international organization. They then are obviously able to identify and to be able to stock their talent pipeline. But certainly for the individuals that can participate in the graduate program, it's invaluable experience to be able to participate in projects and work in a high-paced environment as they are. We do find, though, is that some of our mining customers, particularly because of the remote nature of their operations, they do look for spin-off opportunities where we can connect the neighboring communities, and certainly there are mines which take their social contract with the community very seriously.
And that's a good note to end it on. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Anton Vester. He is Managing Director of Sedna Africa, and Sedna Africa securing a landmark contract with Beira terminal operator Conelda de Mozambique to deploy a Nokia private mobile network at the port in Beira. So that brings us to exactly 20 minutes. Today we continue with Africa World Hour after this.
Gender-based violence is destroying lives and tearing communities apart. It happens in homes, in schools, at workplaces, and too often in silence. But it doesn't have to continue. If you see it, speak out. If you are hurting, reach out. Because doing nothing is not an option. Listen to all 19 SABC radio stations from Wednesday, 23rd of July for hard talk, discussions, advice, dramas, educational shows, and interviews around GBV with experts, survivors, lawmakers, and the whole country affected by gender-based violence. For all your favorite SABC radio stations, call 0800 428 428 to report abuse or get help. GBV, it ends with you. This message is brought to you by the SABC. At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa.
And we continue rounding up some of the top stories that we're looking at on Channel Africa, Africa World Hour this evening. We've been speaking about the start of the WHO Afro-Regional Summit. Health ministers from the region and other countries in the north meeting to discuss the challenges facing Africa and particularly the Global South when it comes to reaching their targets for SDGs. And now we talk about the Eswatini Litigation Center, ULC, alongside Mzwandile Bane Masuku, the Swaziland Rural Women's Assembly, and Melusi Smelani of the Southern Africa Litigation Center. So they filed an urgent application in the High Court of Eswatini to declare unconstitutional an agreement between the Kingdom of Eswatini and the United States of America that resulted in 5 foreign nationals with no familial or legal ties to Eswatini being incarcerated at the Matsapa Maximum Correctional Facility following their deportation from the United States. The case was due to be heard in the High Court of Eswatini last Friday, but was postponed until September 25 because the government reportedly did not file responding papers. The SALC's Melusi Smelani is a co-applicant, as we mentioned in the application, and joins us now to discuss this further. A very good evening, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening, Tsepiso, and thank you for having us this evening.
So when did you first find out about these 5 nationals who were to be incarcerated in Eswatini? We've heard about Swaziland being amongst other nations that have been having talks with the United States to take on third nation nationals on, even though they're not as we said, citizens or have filial relations to the country. So when did you first learn of it?
Surprising enough, Tsepiso, we all learned through social media. We are all aware of the U.S. administration currently. They are certainly coming through social media. So that is when we found out on that very morning of the 16th of July from the Department of Homeland Security. So when this happened, a lot of questions were running through our heads because, obviously we had been following through what had been happening with the U.S. deal with El Salvador as an example, with the deal with Panama. Mind you, we had also been following with the UK-Rwanda deal, and this is stuff that was happening on the news. One wouldn't have thought it would come close to our shore. So this was quite surprising to us as citizens, surprising to us as civil society, and more so because we were hearing that even people in power, that it would be your parliamentarians, and some people, rumors were circling that some people in cabinet were also shocked to hear about this.
That's very interesting, because I was going to ask that you say, you were quite surprised to hear of it, but based on statements made, particularly by human rights activists and organizations in Eswatini, your government is not necessarily transparent in its decision making. So I was going to ask, why would that come as a surprise? But it's interesting to hear that you say even lawmakers, parliamentarians were unaware. Has it been openly said by them, or this is rumors that you're hearing?
So what then prompted our application, Tsapiso, was the mere fact that it was clear for everyone to see that parliamentarians did not have an idea about this. Because I think perhaps around 3 weeks ago, that is when the executive was due for parliament for their first quarter reporting in terms of how are they doing as cabinet, Section 69, they have to account to parliament. It was then that parliamentarians constantly raised this issue when the head of government was reporting back, the prime minister. So it was clear to everyone, and that is when then as civil society, we thought, wait a minute. So clearly here, there is Section 38 that has been breached. That means parliamentarians were not involved in this international agreement, because you'll remember, any sort of foreign policy position that the government takes must be put through the entire sort of system of democratic values. So parliament was not consulted purely because they were asking questions. Because if they were consulted, they wouldn't have been asking the questions that they were asking. I mean, silly questions like, how much are we getting out of this? Who are these people? When are they living? So it was clear for everyone to see that no, Parliament was not involved. And just perhaps, if I may, Tsapiso, to your point about our government being known not to be a transparent one, I think it's important that we clarify that in as much as it might appear to be that our government is not transparent, but it's up to us. It's incumbent on us as the citizenry. It's incumbent on us as civil society to make sure that we put our democratic institutions to test. It's the African Union that has said this year's theme is about the dignity of the African person and the diaspora at large. And therefore, how do we do that without us standing up to sort of push for accountability, to sort of push for open government?
And which is what you're obviously doing now by putting the case to and through the courts. What have you learned thus far, though, as in who may be behind the decision, and not just the final signing off of the agreement, but who would have facilitated the actual deportation of these individuals to Eswatini?
So it then goes back to the case that we've filed, because we've cited the Prime Minister, of course, as the head of government, and we've cited his foreign minister, and then, of course, the Minister of Home Affairs, who would have allowed them entry, the immigration laws. We've also cited the Commissioner General of our correctional services, because this is where these people are being held. And obviously, we are not aware in terms of how this deal was struck, which is precisely why we are in court, right? But we are also not aware of the details of this deal. And there's been a lot of rumor mongering amongst communities. Some people saying, well, look at the trade tariffs, for instance. Swaziland has not been hit hard, so perhaps that is a benefit for us. But for us, that's neither here nor there, because it's hard for us to say we are benefiting from this agreement if we do not even know the details of this agreement. We do not know who signed this agreement, because it was only days later when the Prime Minister started calling out a press conference with the Foreign Affairs Minister next to him that it was clear that, perhaps this is sort of a cabinet collective in terms of the decision that has been taken. But at least for us, the Constitution has been breached, and we are not going to sit idly and allow for our democratic values to continue down the drain, particularly, Tsapiso, if I might, because our Constitution in Eswatini turns 20 years this year. And you were right to say there's been a lot of talk about our country not being a transparent and open one. And we cannot then say 20 years after our constitution, we are going to allow a head of government who's going to slap on the face of separation of powers. So we must continue to ask the courts that they hear this matter. Of course, it's been pushed to the 25th, but we are going to continue our advocacy. We are going to continue with lobbying for anyone with power to sort of be interested and speak to this issue, because it's about democracy, it's about sovereignty, and it's about the rule of law.
And what are you asking the courts to do? To reverse the bilateral agreement with the United States, and also send back those who've been incarcerated in Eswatini?
Well, so what we're asking the court, number one, is to declare that this agreement is an international agreement as envisaged in Section 238 of our Constitution, that it required ratification by Parliament, right? So we want that to be the declaratory order from the court. And The second step would be to say then, if that be the case, then it's an unconstitutional agreement, right? And then the third thing that we're asking the court to do, at least at an interim basis, is to restrain the government from further receiving more people to come from the United States. Because maybe, let me clarify this issue, because there's been a lot of people who's been saying, well, what do you have to gain and what do you have to lose this prison facilities? But our prison facilities, Tsepiso, are being funded by the taxpayer. But over and above that, we have had a report from the Human Rights Commission in Eswatini, which happened at least 2 months before the plane landed, where the Human Rights Commission had said our prisons are under-resourced, but they're also overcrowded. The one particular prison, for instance, the Matsapa Maximum, which is where they're being held, the report from the Human Rights Commission said they are overcrowded by around 170%. So then the question begs, where are you keeping these people? What about the issue of the Mandela Rules, for instance? And the Mandela Rules are the UN minimum standards on the treatment of prisoners. So there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen here, be it the human rights treatment of these people, because they cannot be tortured, they cannot be treated inhumanely. Not just these individuals, but also our own citizens who are incarcerated in these facilities. We are constantly, on the other hand, trying to push for the government to make sure that they're resourcing our facilities, to make sure that these people who are incarcerated are being rehabilitated. So there's a lot that we're asking the court to do, and we understand it's sort of a shock for everyone, considering, as I said earlier, that it's known to be a government that shies away from transparency. But we hope that at least the courts are going to say, look, if the executive is failing to account to Parliament as per Section 69, at least the courts must step in to compel them to sort of comply.
Well, Melusi, I hope you do come back to us and let us know if the government does actually come to the party and file responding papers and what the outcome is. So we will be in touch and speak to you. That is the Melusi Smelani of the Southern Africa Litigation Center. His organization and others have joined hands of filing urgent court papers at the High Court of Eswatini, asking the government to declare not only the processes, but who's behind an agreement with the United States to deport 5 foreign nationals to the country. Brings the time to 8 minutes to 10. Well, let's wrap up with some news on the G20. The National Basic Education Indaba of the G20, beginning in the southern African city of Cape Town. The event is being led by South Africa's Basic Education Minister, Siviwe Gwarube, and her deputy, Dr. Regina Mhaule, as they engage on key issues affecting South Africa's education sector. Gwarube addressed the opening earlier.
This is why, for me, the priority of our G20 speaks to the heart of what needs to be our priority as the education system going forward. Because if we get the foundations of learning right, we won't obsess about whether or not children are taking maths and science when they get to matric. We won't obsess about the matric pass rate and whether we're hitting those notes, because that will already be set from the very foundations of learning. And so I really hope that we use this opportunity of having this chairpersonship of the G20 to not only just talk about this issue in the country, but also to place it on the global stage, in the global south. Let us be the leaders that are needed to really advocate for the chances that our children need. And that, for me, is the way in which we will undo the inequality that still shapes our country. And so we must never forget the human face of what we do. Building an education system where both children, regardless of where they come from, are able to have access to quality education. What the Izindaba have given us is a real picture on the ground, ladies and gentlemen. They have shown us of what is working, where the gaps remain, and how communities themselves are responding. This is the knowledge that must inform our reforms. Our provincial MECs of education have played a central role in this journey. Today, they will share their highlights and commitments from their provincial dialogues. These reports will serve as roadmaps for us going forward. They will tell us what we are able to take and make into real reform. They are the building blocks of South Africa's contribution to the G20 Education Working Group. To deal with some of the systemic issues, we have operationalized the National Education and Training Council, an advisory body made up of experts who will advise on a minimum integrated package of support to schools offering the foundation phase, on how we should strengthen our resourcing model for our schools, as well as reviewing the promotion and progression policies in the system. We are working on finding long-term solutions to the more systemic challenges facing our sector, and we are going to be evidence-led in doing so. Colleagues, I'm looking forward to the contribution of our learners. I think too often young people are spoken to but not listened to. And so today they'll take their rightful place in this dialogue. Alongside them are the voices of education professionals, unions, researchers, and community organizations. Today they represent the collective wisdom that must guide us, because nothing about them without them. This National Indaba is not the end point. It is a convergence, a moment to listen, to reflect, and to move forward with clarity and determination. What we decide and what we commit to here today will shape not only our presidency of the G20, but the future of our education system in the years that lie ahead.
And let's finish off now with more stories as we head into African Diaries, coming up with Sheila Ndikumana. And just a reminder that we are on the socials for you to tell us exactly what you'd like to hear from Africa World Hour. Okay, so we close off with this story. Speaking about the Bureau of Market Research at the University of South Africa, it's released the latest personal income estimates of South Africa. Gender disparities are particularly stark. Although women make up 53% of the adult population, they receive only 41.8% of cash flow income. Men, who represent 47% of the adult population, are 58.2% of total income. Channel Africa's Sisi Skhalo spoke to the head of Personal Finance Research Division at the Bureau of Market Research, Yakolis Meiring.
We run a model on an annual basis to get estimates regarding personal income for the South African consumer. Specifically, if we consider the distribution when it comes to males versus females, we could see that the South African population, if you look at the adult population, so those are our individuals 15 years and older, they make up about 53% of the population are females, but they only earn in cash flow terms, so that is the income that actually goes to their pockets. They only earn 42%, 41.7% of cash flow income in South Africa. So there's definitely that gender disparity when it comes to earning income in South Africa, like there's a global issue actually. And that stems from when we consider the sources of income, for example, of females versus males. In South Africa, a lot of our females are grant dependent. So actually, if we look at the main source of income, we could see from our analysis that 34.5% of our females report grants as their main source of income. And that is relatively low values of income, where when you consider our males, a larger portion of them are actually earning investment income. For example, a large portion of their income originates from investment income, where our females seem to be excluded from that, or not earning or benefiting from the significant growth in investment income that we saw in the recent few years. But if we consider like salaries and wages, it's very similar, the portion of, if we look at the basket of different sources of income, salaries and wages are about 60% for both males and females if we look at the value of cash. So that stays the main source of income for a lot of South Africans in general.
Do we know if the policies that are there in the country are able to address this income gap?
Unfortunately, income gap between males and females is a global concern. There is a large debate that continues every year where people that are in the same position, females that are appointed, for example, in the same position as male colleagues, with the same experience levels, etc., they're not earning the same level of income when it comes to those that are earning a salaries and wages.
And that report there by Sisi Skhalo, just reflecting on the Bureau of Market Research study by the University of South Africa on the latest personal income estimates for South Africa. From us, that's it from Africa World Hour. Up next is African Diaries with Shayla Ndukumana. Until the next time, good night.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tshepiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa.